The 4th Special Forces Group encountered something on the East Coast. It changed everything. Part 2. Written by The Forest Has Eyes. We moved through a now destroyed decontamination chamber into an open lab, dark with a few red lights casting an ominous hue across the room. Different cylindrical tanks lined either side of the room, lying down horizontally on stands. Several of them had gunshots in them, others were fogged up, but one of them, at the end of the room, lay center against the back wall. It was broken open, and seemingly the center of the black ooze as it actively poured from the tank. Captain Walker flipped up his nods as we did, and all of us shined our tack lights. A lone deer-headed cultist. The cultist was standing inside of the black ooze as it climbed up his pants and soaked his previously white parka, which was now a deep jet black. Noticing all of the lights bathing him, he turned around. As he did, more black ooze poured from under his mask. There was a deep silence in the room. Just the sounds of heavy breathing from inside our mask, the sounds of the tar leaking out of the tank. It was a silence which was broken when he spoke.
Nicholas Walker.
His voice was deep and monotone. This caught Captain Walker and all of us off guard. The captain lowered his rifle just slightly, allowing him to make eye contact with the man. "Who are you people?" Walker said in a low but furious tone. The man laughed.
I am simply an instrument of change, Nicholas Walker, as you are an instrument of order.
This only pissed off the captain.
You see, society as we know it today seeks to instill a new normal. One where everything is fine. People leech off of others and the ways of the old world, the primordial world. One that natives and tribesmen once knew are kept at bay by men with guns.
The man reached out, black ooze seemingly radiating from his pores as it dropped to the floor.
This is the building block of the universe. It shapes, it creates, and it can make all of us beautiful. It is the DNA, the alpha and the omega of which all of those boogeymen you and your government seeks to keep quiet. They come from here, a layer under the surface of the current way of the world.
All of us were quiet. Although his ramblings seemed crazy, the effect that the tar had on people, on the ground and the earth around it, in some way, it added up. The man spoke again.
Tell me, Captain, how many beings will you walk into the shadows and put a bullet into the head of before you realize that this is futile? I realized it is futile, me and my brothers. We realized. All of those who go missing, the forest, shunned for disappearances, and the things that they contain. We should not fear it. We should not fear them. We should embrace them.
Walker flipped his selector switch, taking aim at the man. You and your cell are going to be hunted down and... The cultist interrupted him.
Cell? This isn't just one group in one part of the world. You've seen the reports, Captain Walker. Afghanistan, the jungles of Indochina, the Mongolian deserts, the forest of Bavaria. It's breaking through the surface. What you call anomalies, treating them like monsters. They're coming back to reclaim this world.
That's when we heard the sounds of coughing and gurgling coming from behind us.
And they're going to make us all beautiful.
Our medic called out, "Captain!" We all turned. Chuck, the man who had taken the glass in the neck, dropped to one knee. The wound packing on his neck became soaked in the same black tar. And the more that he coughed, the more caked his mask became with that black ooze. None of us knew what to do. Green Berets, the free world's finest, and we all just froze. I kept my gun trained on the cultist who simply stood there, probably smiling underneath that deer mask. "Chuck," Captain Walker said authoritatively. Chuck didn't answer. He just fought at the packing around his neck. He stood there for a few moments before speaking up again. "Sergeant." That's when Chuck pulled the packing off of his neck, and what must have been a gallon of that black ooze spilled out onto his uniform, painting his top and kit, his multicam becoming a mess of black, oily brown, and green. Doc was hesitant to do anything, but when he moved towards him, "Don't touch him!" Captain Walker barked at him, causing Doc to back off. Chuck removed his helmet, the Kevlar smacking off the floor as he pulled off his mask. The black ooze ran through the veins all over his head, all over his face, creating a horrifying black web just underneath his skin. The tar spat from his lips, and his eyes were completely jet black, with more of that stuff coming out of his tear ducts. He looked around nervously, almost as if he was blind. Captain Walker's breathing became tense. He cursed under his breath. "Chuck?" he asked again. The Green Beret staff sergeant simply spat out more of that black ooze. He then looked around, now seemingly able to see us, and then he moved, trying to lunge at us, but he stopped, holding himself back as he banged his hands against his head, hyperventilating. I looked back to the cultist. He stood there, arms now crossed. My eyes broke from him when I heard Chuck wheezing, finally saying, I'm sorry, sir." He then reached down to his holster, pulling out his sidearm, a Sig Sauer M17. Chief's eyes went wide underneath his mask. He then looked to the captain. "Walker." "Chuck, don't." Captain Walker yelled as Chuck brought the muzzle of the gun to the underside of his head, the brain stem. "No!" The shot rang out. Staff Sergeant Charles Chuck Ivinsky, airborne qualified, a proud member of the 4th Special Forces Group for over 8 years, a loving husband and father. My friend fell to the floor, his weapon clattering out of his hand on the way down. Officially, it was listed that he was killed in a mortar strike in Libya, the place that Raider was supposed to officially be that night. Unofficially, the silence broke as Captain Walker turned, letting loose on the cultist with his scar. .223 tore through the man's coat as it did nothing but seemingly cut through the black tar like butter. The captain fired until there was so much of the black ooze on the wall that you would have sworn that those tiles came black from the factory. He fired until his bolt clicked empty. The cultist dropped to his knees voluntarily. He gazed up at the captain as he seemingly melted into the floor.
Before this is over, Captain, every single warfighter that you drag into this will die.
We all stood there, watching every last inch of that deer mask sink into the tar. The captain turned, looking at Chuck, then at the medic. "Get him up, he's coming with us." As we all packed up, Chuck's team went with the comm sergeant and the chief to escort them out. Mine stayed with me as we watched Captain Walker pull out a thermite grenade from his belt and toss it into the tank. Whatever is in that black ooze, whatever it was made of, it caused it to erupt immediately. We heard hissing, followed by screeching. The captain simply turned and loaded a fresh magazine into his scar. "We're done here," he said. Usually, after these types of things, we have an after-action report with the entirety of Raider. However, the second that we touched down back at the COF, we let the guys loose. Usually it's both team leads, Raider lead, and the CWO of the team. However, this time it was just Chief, Captain Walker, and myself. I peeled off my kit, tossing it in the locker and heading out. There is an all too pungent, homey smell to a combat shirt soaked in sweat after a long op. However, the sweet and sour aroma of that tar just made me want to burn the thing. My locker was at the far end of our wall. Once it was locked, I headed over to the COF door. I paused and looked at one of the lockers. Chuck's. The shock and misery that hit us on that Black Hawk ride back. The one that the guys were probably feeling now as they let loose on the post-QRF dry status. It was replaced by rage. Whoever they were, those deer-headed cultists, whatever the anomalies, the beings that they talked about, we are going to take them all down. We have to. I stepped into the conference room. Chief was at the window side end of the table across from Captain Walker. Walker had cracked open a pack of cigarettes while Chief rubbed his temples, halfway into a watermelon body armor drink. "Sergeant," Walker said, beckoning me to sit down. He offered me a cigarette. I declined. We all sat there, a strange, tired silence looming over us before the door opened again. I was expecting some colonel to come in, shake our hands, and call us heroes. Maybe some sergeant major talking about his glory days and saying maybe Sergeant Avinsky could get the Medal of Honor in a few decades. What I didn't expect was an old man with gray hair in a navy blue suit. Chief stood up as the man approached, looking to shake hands. He immediately brushed it off. No, you boys have had a long night. Sit." I can't figure out what his accent was. It didn't sound particularly southern, but not northern, also kind of French. The man had a file folder with him. He opened up a chair next to us and laid it on the table. His eyes were sympathetic as he looked around. "I am sorry about your comrade, Staff Sergeant Avinsky." Walker sighed, rubbing his eyes. "We all knew the score. Well, this time we did, at least. If we're gonna keep doing this, we can't keep doing this blind, last-minute, clandestine stuff." The man nodded. "I agree." Chief capped his empty bottle, tossing it into the trash near us. "Look, I wasn't here for the last op, but after tonight, someone needs to start explaining some things right now." Walker looked over to him. "Chief, this is Xavier. He's a third party, let's just say. He's working with the government." Xavier interrupted. and several others. Walker nodded. And several others. About a reoccurring anomaly problem that keeps popping up across the world. Walker's words. I thought back to what that cultist said about this being a worldwide problem. I looked to Xavier. How long has this been going on? He straightened his tie as he sat back. Well, operations like this have happened ever since, well, before World War II, before the Great War. Minor incidents, previously unconnected. Europe has always had a rich history in dealing with undead Transylvanians, lycanthropes, and witches in the swamps of Scandinavia. Even North America. The natives tell stories about the skinwalker, warlocks that cast down the pelts of animals, that seek to harass tribes and their reservations. Acts that still go on today. Xavier then looked over to Captain Walker. Your captain here appeared on my radar after he had a few run-ins himself in Minnesota. I raised an eyebrow. Walker looked down. I was hunting in the wrong area. Hallowed ground. I met a Native American cannibal demon. My jaw dropped. An effing Wendigo? A Wendigo? Chief's eyes grew wide. You said that it was a bear. Yeah, I did, Captain Walker replied. Xavier continued. The 1st Special Forces Group has also had some off-the-books operations, should we say. In the 1980s, a group of Sasquatches causing an uproar in a western forest preserve were hunted down by them. This has been going on for a long time, Staff Sergeant, and it is getting even more prevalent. Previously unconnected events are now connected. If we want to stop what is coming, we need a unified front. This war isn't going to be conventional, and we most certainly cannot waste time trying to capture and hide everything. Extermination, Walker said abruptly, and to the point. He continued by saying, look, having all of the tier 1s in the world is great, but we need men with experience in this particular subject. I don't want to face off with some death cult with a bunch of kids straight out of selection. Xavier nodded. I agree, which is why I've been searching out individuals as well. You might know one, Captain. Xavier gave Walker a strange look. Walker's reaction surprised me. Nolan. I thought he went dark after the Kazamoth Estate events. The Kazamoth Estate? I asked. Walker gestured with his non-cigarette hand. Kazamoth Industries has been around for a few years now. They were doing something at that estate down in the South Missouri woods. Nolan was a security officer tasked there. He dug into some of the things he shouldn't have. Ended up saving the whole town. He's been dark for a few years now. Walker looked to Xavier. If we're doing this... He turned his gaze at me and Chief before back to Xavier. And we are. Because I don't want mine or anyone else's families turning into mush or demons. We need to get everyone on board that we can. Xavier nodded. He opened the file protector and handed each of us a laminated dossier. At the top, it read, PEXU, Paranormal Extermination Unit, Task Force Raider.